there's lots of different kinds of deadlifts. And really, we've got to know what the goal of it is. Now, a lot of times just people go, well, the goal is to lift the weight off the floor. But honestly, some people do it for a certain set of muscles or a certain region. And it's not just about the sport of how much can you lift, like it might be for a power lifter. So to some degree, we've got to know why you're doing it. But aside from that, let's look at the mechanics as it's similar to a squat. In fact, people that think of exercise names, when they think of exercises, a squat's for this. It works this. It's for this purpose. A deadlift is for this. It's very different. If we don't look at, to some degree, that magic, that memorized magic about an exercise and how we've categorized it based upon its name, and we look at it truly from a mechanical nature and from a mechanical analysis point of view, squats and deadlifts are just variations of each other with some very obvious differences, but those differences are in the details. And let's kind of take a look at what those differences, how much they might matter, what do they really change. Here's the first thing that I think I want to look at, and it's obviously where the bar is. And the bar being in front of you, and depending upon the percentage of load that the bar is, the weight, that it is to, you see this guy, Franco Colombo, he's got a lot of weight compared to his body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds and you're deadlifting 400 pounds, that bar is the primary influence in terms of effect on center of mass. And we know center of mass has to be over the feet. So I couldn't squat down like this and have my arms take this load that has to be over your feet and take it out, 400, 500, 600, 800 pounds, and take it out over your knees and then let it, because as soon as it comes out past your knee, it's going to be past your toe and you're pretty much falling over. It becomes the thing you're moving around. And not only the thing that you're moving around, because it has to be in a vertical path. People are like, oh, it takes on a different path. 400 pounds does not take on a different path. 800 pounds sure didn't take on a different path. It's going to be pretty much straight up and down. And so the thing about that is you're going to have to, if it's a bar, you're going to have to keep your knee back behind that bar as it scoots around it or in front of the knee. Well, if you remember in the squat proportions discussion, there's an anterior posterior, a front and back relationship between the travel of the knee anteriorly and the travel of the hip posteriorly. And there's a give and take in that. What I mean is if the knee can't go forward, the butt has to make up for that by going further backwards. Moment arm, this distance from the line of force, the bar, and its vertical line of force with gravity, is what determines what's going to get tired here and what's working here and what's required here. This will have in this position, very little, virtually none, of the requirements for the knee muscles. And as it comes progressively forward, these requirements are ever so slightly diminished proportionally as the knee muscle, quads, etc., as this requirement goes increases proportionally. So that whole thing is about, are you using a bar? There's also, I don't see a picture in this array of illustrations and photos of people deadlifting, but there are what the world has called trap bars, or these bars that actually are made to wrap around you, so you're not bound or restrained by the bar itself and you having to deal with it. And the thing about that is if the bar itself is not in front of my knees and it's wrapped around me in some way, shape, or form, like the diamond-shaped or hexagonal-shaped thing that wraps around and we can put weight on, then my knee can go forward some. And that deadlift, you or the world would call it a deadlift because of where the weight is. It's not up here, so it's not a squat, it's down here. But the mechanics could be similar to a squat because your knee can now go forward. So really, it's a squat with a bar in a different place. And for looking at it from that point of view, you assuming you're willing to do that, you start to see inside of the mechanics of these things and become less worried about the name itself and the magical results associated with a name. So this bar is a major influence, and I hope you can see that. And an interesting thing, on the squat mechanics deal, if you look at that, we looked at what if you had quote unquote not great proportions for squatting, and this floor to knee segment was very much shorter by comparison to this thigh or femur segment. If that was the case and you're deadlifting, it's actually a little bit less of an influence because you're already leaning forward by the pure nature of having this bar go in front of your knee. So if you were already required to be in this position to squat because of your proportions, deadlifts are not going to be altered that much by your proportion. Now if they're extreme, you're still not going to be able to get to the range you want. You still may not be able to touch the bar to the floor because of your proportions. So let's talk about range of motion for a second. And somebody says, wait a minute, if you're not taking the bar to the floor, it's not a deadlift. Yeah, it is. There's one group that needs to take the bar to the floor. And it's the people that have rules for this exercise that are unrelated to the human body. And the rules are, this is a sport, and we're powerlifters, and it must come off the floor. And as soon as someone else goes, well, don't I have to take it off the floor? I'm gonna go, are you a powerlifter? And you're gonna, no, I don't compete or anything, but I kind of want to get stronger, or I want to work my low back or whatever. I'm gonna go, if you're not a powerlifter, then what does this have to do with you? Because that's the whole point in understanding exercise, is modifying it for what you want and not living by some arbitrary rules of 100 years of tradition or a sport you don't participate in. Think about this. What's the right amount of running to do to burn calories? Well, it's a 5K. Why? Do you run 5Ks? Do you run 10Ks? Are you a marathoner? Do you have to run 20 some odd miles to burn calories? Why did you set that invisible finish line out there for yourself? That's a sport. It has nothing to do with you going out for a jog and for a run. That should be more about your tolerance and what your body feels like, and is my hamstring getting weird and that kind of stuff, because you're doing it for health, theoretically. So that's a great lesson, by the way. Thanks to the deadlift here, all of a sudden, it became more valuable to us, because thinking big picture and satellite view, why do we have these imposed rules when we're not participating in the things that actually require those rules? So back to the deadlift, sorry. Yeah, so you got a different bar that doesn't require the same thing. You got different stuff. You got different mechanics. They still might limit your motion because you can't get down there because they don't allow it. So yeah, range of motion relative to this thing can be influenced by your proportions and arm length and all kinds of things like that. But think about these other things as well. What is your goal? Is it really this? Is it really this? Does working specific things in your mind, or a group of things in your mind, necessarily require going to a certain depth? And can't you progress to that? I think you can. This thing is a skill. It's a complex skill. Probably not like pitching, but it's a skill in and of itself. And so you should progress to a depth that your body allows you to do appropriately for you. And that's, to me, where I talk about client defined when I'm working with patients or clients of any way, shape, and form, of any demographic. But you're the client that you're training now, maybe because you're the consumer and you're like, yeah, I love to deadlift and I don't want a trainer or what. You're the client, so it needs to be built around you. Client defined, that's you. So what else? Progression, control. Control, the range you should work through now, that you should progress through, and maybe beyond, is whatever you can control and whatever your structure allows, segmental proportions, and the mechanics of the thing, like we said. One final thing to think about, and like I said, this is not all inclusive. So if you're going, well, what if I have that goal? Let me see what it looks like. Well, we'll do that later, in the gym or something, and that'll be fun. But think about this: grip. Oh, here's another sport-specific thing to talk about, because historically, powerlifters, the way you see them, the way they do a deadlift, is by this alternating grip. And that's purposeful because they can't use straps. They have to perform a grip that, as the bar tries to roll out of their hand one direction, the other hand is trying to roll out of it. They're basically opposing each other to keep the bar from rolling. And that's really cool and beneficial to those guys who have rules. Why are you doing that? If you're not a power lifter and you're thinking, but I'm deadlifting, so I have to do that. I don't know about that. It's not true. Here's one reason that if you're not required to do that by the sport, I wouldn't do it. Because to some degree, if I supinate, if I turn my palm to the front or I'm standing up, there's going to be an associated external rotation of my shoulder. And that's not bad. Just hang on for a second. Don't start going, oh, that's bad. It's not bad. Just listen. And that's going to be followed by a retraction on this side. Your shoulder blade going backwards to help aid in this position. We don't stay here and just try to do it all here, right? In the wristy, forearmy stuff. Opposite over here. You're pronated here, you're internally rotated, and you're following again with a scapular thing that we call protraction. That's not bad either. The interesting part about this is there is very commonly a spinal relationship with that, a turning of the trunk. So your pelvis might still be facing forward. I'm going to stand up, my head's going to go maybe out of the frame, but don't worry about it. And so I'm going to actually twist, very commonly twist a little bit in my spine. That for some people could be a big deal, because now you have a tremendous load influencing the forces on your spine. And that grip becomes a challenge or a potential cost or risk to this exercise. Now, some people would say, well, if I do it this way, on the next set, I'm going to do it this way. That's double the trouble. That's not fixing it. Fixing it is maintaining a grip that keeps you relatively symmetrical in terms of what you can do with your spine. And I know right then someone just said that they didn't, they kind of dismissed what I said before, and they go, but that's not how you do a deadlift. Stop thinking that way. What are you doing it for? If you're not going for the trophy, stop worrying about the rules of powerlifting. And along with that, range of motion idea and get the grip that's appropriate for you idea, you could do various ranges for various sets or on various days and adjust the load accordingly. Because if I go down shallower, if I put pins here in a squat rack or something, right, and stop the weight early, then I can use more load from here to here, maybe. Should be able to. If I go lower, chances are the mechanics are going to require me to use less load. So I can really, honestly, if you prefer, call it 2 or 3 different versions of a deadlift, if that makes you feel better, with different names, Fred, George, and Sam. I don't care what you call it. Deadlift from the floor, deadlift from mid shin, or tibia, deadlift from the knees, all with different loads. Because quite frankly, what you lift from the floor, unless you're getting fully fatigued like a true one rep max, or the final rep of, to complete failure of a set, most of the non-failure reps, the top is the easiest part because the weight becomes balanced in essence over your joints. So you theoretically, before full fatigue, could do more load near the top with shorter range. So there's some considerations. I'm not telling you what to do. They're just considerations and things to think about. But ultimately, as I keep referring to all the time, it really needs to be based upon not so much the exercise, but who is doing this, what their real goal is for doing it, what do they have available in terms of joint ranges and structural proportions, etc. Do they own what they're doing? Can they really control this thing, or are they all over the map? And is there a tolerance level for it, which very often is progressive. But if you dive in early because you're trying to be something you're not, then whether it's soreness, back pain, SI, sacroiliac joint screws up, whatever it is, that's a sign of poor tolerance and poor progression. You don't have to kill yourself the first day to get better 6 months from now, or 2 months from now, or a year from now. That's what progression's all about. It's not just about weight. So anyway, just some considerations, and yeah, we'll do some more later.